Qaum, Mulk, Sultanat, Citizenship and National Belonging in Pakistan. The moderator is Nadeem Farooq Paracha. Nadeem Farooq Paracha is a prominent Pakistani author and social commentator. He has authored 8 best-selling books on the social and political history of Pakistan. He is also associated with Qaum Leo Burnett as a head of ideas and research. Over to you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and thank you for coming here for a book launch of Ali Usman Qasmi's Qaum, Mulk, Sultanat. Okay, I think if someone gives me about 4 hours for a session on this book, I won't be able to sort of cover the content in this. It is so dense and so detailed, like most of Ali's books. This is his 3rd book, and unfortunately one of them is not available in Pakistan. And some point in time I would like to talk about that as well. So before I start, this book is about citizenship. Something we take for granted, and a lot of people think that this idea of citizenship or nationalism or nation state is thousands of years old. It was always there. But as we know, it's most probably not older than 300 years. So we will be talking about Ali's ideas, how he's explored this concept, especially in the context of what is called the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent, India and Pakistan, and to a certain extent Bangladesh. With us on the panel is Martin Axmann. He specializes in studying nation building, nationalism, the nation state, and more interestingly, what is called subnationalisms. So we will be talking about that as well. Huma Ghaffar, she's not a historian, but she writes how history is written and what impact that can have on academics, intellectuals, and people at large, how you write history. And we'll be talking to her as well. I've just started to read her book. So Ali, I'll start off not with a question, but I'll start off with something a story you've mentioned right in the onset of the book, which might contextualize exactly the kind of confusion that was created when partition happened between Hindu, Muslims, and India and Pakistan. It reminded me of something what Manto wrote in Toba Take Singh about a mental hospital, and one of the patients didn't know where he belonged. He's been living here for thousands of years and didn't know how can you have 2 people now. Half of the hospital, or there was a tree, half of it was in Pakistan suddenly, and half of it was in India. So I'll ask to tell us a story which I had totally forgotten, but like you always do in your books, you come up with information and sources from archives which are there to be found, but people just ignore them. But I thought that story emphasizes and manifests brilliantly the kind of confusion that was created, psychological confusion, political confusion, sense of belonging, and people got confused by their identity when Pakistan was made and India became different. Tell us the story of Salma Agha, which you have written here right at the onset of the book in the intro.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very generous introduction. So the book begins with the story about a man called J.K. Mehra. J.K. Mehra was the station director of Lahore Radio, and at the time of partition, he wanted to stay back, and like so many other people, thousands of Hindus and Sikhs, who were on the wrong side of the border in West Punjab. But the only way he could have stayed back alive was to convert to Islam. And hence he made a public pronouncement saying that now that I have converted to Islam, he went to the Khatib of the Badshahi Mosque and declared that he has become a Muslim, and his new name was to be Ahmad Suleiman. Now, the story does not end here. Mehra Suleiman's step-granddaughter was Salma Agha. Now, Salma Agha was, I mean, as we know, she is a quote-unquote Pakistani actress. But she spent a lot of her time, you know, doing films in India as well, and she grew up, spent part of her life in UK. But when she wanted to finally move to Bombay and to settle down there, she wrote an application and to get citizenship, Indian citizenship, claiming that her grandfather was a Hindu. Right? So for her grandfather to stay in Pakistan, he had to say that I have become a Muslim. For her granddaughter to move to India and claim Indian citizenship, she had to say that her grandfather was a Hindu, and hence to establish that kind of an ancestry. And also it is indicative of the changes in in India's citizenship law, which now privilege one's religious identity as a Hindu or a Sikh. So that, I think, as you pointed out, sums up. And mind you, this is not the only story of conversion. This is perhaps one of the more known stories of conversion. But you know, across Punjab, there were thousands of people. There's an official figure of at least 70,000 people who converted at the time of partition because they wanted to stay back, because they said, you know, we have our property here, shops and everything. And so that's a separate project altogether. But yeah, I thought this would help understand that, that it's not just a legal claim that you can make to the state as its citizens. You also have to belong to the nation, which, in my opinion, it's inherently a majoritarian project. And this is why Mehra or Suleiman, he had to, in order to become a Pakistani, he had to be a Muslim as well.
Thanks. You see, like, citizenship is a project of modernity and colonialism. That's what I got from your book, basically. Now, all your books, including this one, you always concentrate on a community or communities trying to come to terms with modernity, which is alien to them most of the times, but at the same time trying to retain a pre-modern identity, and it is that tussle. So is this a problem? And we know, and you've written about it, that the confusion it caused, the disruption it caused on a psychological level, political level. If this is a problem, what is the solution to this problem? Like, for example, what I'm trying to say is that there was a reaction against modernity from the 19th century onwards in this region, and we saw two responses. One was saying, oh, we have to go back 1400 years and adopt the authentic Islam. And the other was the Sir Sayyid Khans and Chiragh Alis, that we have to be modern because Islam is inherently modern. But we've seen over the years, over the decades, that these responses haven't quite been challenged, that the idea of nationalism and modern and citizenship in this region. Is this really a problem that needs to be resolved, or do we need to just, I don't know, keep on doing what we're doing, fusing? Like, for example, you talk about, or Weber talks about, there's one thing called spiritual citizenship and worldly citizenship. Maybe we were always trying to create a fusion, to create a citizen, which we have failed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex question. I would say that there is that part of the problem is as to how these pre-political organic communities and how we want to transform them into and make them compatible with some modern political ideas. right? That includes nation, that includes citizen, and this is where I think this is what the project is about. That there is this the kind of like primordiality, so to speak, but how do we draw upon that vast, complex, symbolic, cultural repertoire in order to craft or imagine a sense of identity? You know, so the problem which I see, and I think the problem which you also identify, is, you know, the flattening of this complexity to and where it becomes a statist hegemonic project to craft a singular kind of identity, right? And this is which is essentially a very modern project, as you have pointed out. So so in a way, I mean, my answer to that question would be that there is, and especially in the context of the 1950s, where I'm mostly focusing my argument, that there was this moment of, there was a post-colonial moment, there was a possibility of thinking about new things, new themes, political ideologies, political subjectivities. And perhaps that was the moment where one could have, and where people were coming together to articulate their aspirations for these newer forms of political subjectivities, while drawing upon whatever they thought was the basis of their, you know, these pre-political organic repertoire, right? So the confusion arises, or the problem arises, when the state sort of enforces a more hegemonic kind of an account at the expense of this more fluid, complex tradition, which could have been more inclusive or more accommodative of diversity, and could have in fact been more pluralistic. So rather than being along the binary of conservative or modern or secular or religious, this kind of ambiguity could have been more productive, in my opinion.
Thanks. This gets me, Martin. When Ali talks about this majoritarian idea of citizenship, one of the responses, and this is where you've written a lot on sub-nationalisms in this region, especially in Pakistan and India, and the book I read, it is basically on Baloch nationalism, you know, how the roots of Baloch nationalism, for example. But if nationalism was a Western project, was a colonial project, or idea, let's say, if not a project, then what is subnationalism as a response? Like, for example, subnational, we have a meta-narrative of a Pakistani nationalism, which is being developed. And within that, as a response, who don't agree with that nationalism are your Baloch nationalists, your Sindhi nationalists, your Pashtun nationalists. So what is subnationalism? Is it equally a colonial idea, or a European idea, or a modern idea?
Well, I do agree that nationalism is a very modern idea, but I would not call it a colonial project. Nation states became the principal organizational setup throughout the world.
Can you speak a little bit loudly, please?
The world was divided into nation states. It's basically something that happened at the end of colonialism. It is a European idea, but I think it got worldwide popularity at the end of colonialism. I think what is really important to know and to understand, that nations are nothing natural and not God-given. It is something that is made, created, actually invented. And it's often said that a nation is an imagined community. And I think this book is an exceptional study on how the Pakistani nation was actually made, formed, and created. And I think Pakistan is a very particular case, because here the state preceded the nation. And of course, a nation is never a static project. And again, the case of Pakistan, you all know, in 1971, the Pakistani nation divided into two nations, in the Bangladesh and Pakistan. And of course, there is basically no end to nations. A nation is a rather random association of people who feel they belong together. And there could be many more nations and nation states than we see today in the world. And of course, existing nation states can break up into smaller units, because smaller identities also develop national aspirations. And I think that is the case in Balochistan. In fact, in Balochistan, according to my reading, feelings of being a nation actually preceded the Pakistan movement. The first national feelings sort of arose in the 1920s when no one was actually speaking about Pakistan yet.
I agree, that's true. And this is the time when we start talking about, saw the emergence of Hindu nationalism eventually, and Muslim nationalism, and so on and so forth, and then later on Pashtun nationalism. And like for example, the Pashtun nationalist Wali Khan used to say that thousands of years ago he was a Pashtun, and 1400 years ago he became Muslim, and was only a few decades he's been a Pakistani. You know, so basically what I was saying was, I was talking about responses. Like you say, of course, nation states emerge, nationalism emerge, and then they splinter and break off. But, okay, you're saying it's not a colonial project, and I agree with you, but it's still a Western idea, nationalism, right? And like I was talking to Ali right now, there were two kinds of responses to this sort of nationalism. There was the so-called Islamist or Islamic response, where they said, okay, we will have nothing to do with this idea. Like Maududi, for example, he hated the whole idea of nation state and nationalism. You know, he was talking about creating a more, or recreating a state which existed, or is an imagined state. That was an imagined state as well, 1400 years ago. So my thing was that, since you've done so much on subnationalisms, at this point in time, it is, I think, my observation that Pashtun nationalism, and I would like to ask you, because you've done a lot of field work on this, is Pashtun nationalism, like the only nationalism I see existing at this point in time in Pakistan and has a lot of following is Baloch nationalism. We've seen Sindhi nationalism totally drowned, hardly any existence of that, and I think Pashtun nationalism is gone totally. Would you agree with me that Baloch nationalism is now the only nationalism which is challenging the majoritarian nationalist idea in Pakistan?
I do agree to that, yes, very much. And I think one should also highlight a big difference between the Pashtuns and the Baloch, because the Pashtuns, in a way, have a country, Afghanistan, where they are the majority. While the Baloch have lost their state, they have lost the Khanat in 1948. So I think that makes them quite different. The Baloch are longing for something they believe they had in the past and which was forcefully taken from them, while the Pashtuns, in a way, can always fall back on Afghanistan as their country.
Thanks. Okay, Huma, like I said, that I'm just in the process of reading your book, and you talk about that it's important to study how history is written. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, just briefly explain historiography. What is historiography? You know, because a lot of people get confused. History, what's the difference between writing history and historiography? So please, if you can, just briefly explain what that is.
So historiography is basically the study of the historical writing or analysis, critical analysis of it, because there are many different approaches in the study of history. it is not just collecting facts and figures and information, because when we are going to answer the question why this thing was happened, so there is an interpretation and approaches, and we will not get any one answer. That's why history is a living subject, because still studies are going on different fields and another thing is that there are exploration of different evidences and then rewriting of a history. So how historian, because with, it is also mentioned that we use different spectacles when we look at the past. So it is basically a reconstruction of the past, not only what happened, but basically we are reconstructing a past and through the eyes of from the present. And that's why if you look at the history, Pakistan, history writing in Pakistan, there are basically, unfortunately, from the time of the formation of Pakistan, there is a two-nation theory, or you may say that a nationalist approach and role of a state in developing a nation-state. And if you look at the modern concept of a nation, we may say that it's a politically and socially constructed concept. And that's why in Pakistan, unfortunately, state involved and played a very important role in writing, or you may say that what is the narration or other things. And Usman Qasmi also mentioned that Pakistan History Board was formed in 1949, and there was a book under the title of Short History of Hind Pakistan. Now we are no more using this term, but there was a term, History of Hind Pakistan, and there was a prominent historian in this group who have written it. And interesting thing which I found in that book is that the term Indo-Pakistani is used for the Muslims of India. And it means that before formation of Pakistan, they are using that term. If I give you an example, they said, Congress is saying that we are representative of Indo-Pakistani. So how could they use these terms, our historian, in that way? But the thing is that at that time, this was the initial question to how to promote the identity of Muslim, which started during the Pakistan movement, a two-nation theory, or you may say said Muslim and Hindu-Muslim separateness. And in early decade, it was predominant, the Hindu-Muslim terms used in history literature. So I take a little longer.
That's okay. That's fine.
You just
Thank
asked
you.
me
Thank
a
you.
simple question,
Thank you.
what is historiography?
I see your book, all your books basically, you know, as brilliantly argued cases of you know, suggesting that most of the things we believe in and identify with and belong to are constructed. Right? They're social constructs, they're political constructs, they're not organic, right? Okay, my question is, people who react to it, like I told you, there have been certain responses to that people say, okay, this is a social construct, this is not me, the organic me is something else. So just tell me, like for example, those responses sometimes, like I told you, there's an Islamist response in the concept, in the context. Aren't they equally constructed as well, based on certain myths? So what is the real us?
I mean, I don't think there can be an answer to that. But you know, so what is then important is to emphasize the constructionness or the imagination of nationhood, which is also not to say that it's all built out of thin air. I mean, it's about like how this imagination is a creative process, right? It's so it involves imagination in that sense. So one, it's important that it's a construction, and B, you know, it's important to critique it, and especially the sort of like the hidden power structures which shape the processes whereby such an imagination takes place. And thirdly, I think, you know, then the contestations and how these contestations can posit alternative ways of being as to how this could have been. And this is partially, I think I can say, is part of my project, which is to try to think of the Pakistan project in a different way. That there is no inevitability to what Pakistan became eventually, and the kind of regressive society that emerged out of it. And that there was a possibility, there were people who were arguing for a different kind of an imagination in the 1950s. And my sort of effort is to try retrieve that from the archives, from different debates, from different discourses, and to say that, you know, this also could have been a Pakistan, and which becomes more important or relevant, especially now in the given circumstances where I think we are facing perhaps the biggest challenge, biggest existential challenge to Pakistan since maybe 1971. And the whatever the ideology, whatever the artifact keeping it together has collapsed or crumbled under the, you know, under the weight of its own contradictions. So maybe now it's the time to then think and reflect on some other form of historical narrative for Pakistan, which is grounded in Pakistan's history. It's just that needs to be retrieved.
Thanks. Martin, again coming back to subnationalism, that's one of my favorite subjects as well. So why is there a subnationalism since you studied in Pakistan, for example? Like I said, there's been an evolving, and Ali has very well documented the whole idea of citizenship based on what Pakistani nationalism is or became after 1971. And there have been responses like subnationalists, Sindhi nationalists not agreeing with this, saying it's like a Punjabi elite majoritarian idea, Baloch national. But are the reasons for this subnationalism purely economic and political, or also it's something to do with culture as well? Because in the end, majority of them, all of them are Muslims, right? And so what do you think is this because they feel that they are not treated fairly as far as economics is concerned, they're not getting their share? Is it political that they don't have the reach to to reach Islamabad? What is there are other things as well, like cultural differences. Like for example, a Baloch Muslim will be a bit different than Sindhi Muslim or Punjabi Muslim. So what are the factors which create or part of these subnationalisms?
I think it's all of the factors that you have actually mentioned. But I would say in very general terms that just the common religious belief is not a good founding for a national state. And we see the problems with the two-nation theory, which serves sort of as the theoretical basis of this state even today. There are almost as many subcontinental Muslims in Pakistan today as there are in Bangladesh and in India. According to theory, they should be all part of the Pakistani nation, perhaps not Pakistani citizens because they live outside the country, but according to theory, they are part of this nation of subcontinental Muslims. And just due to the fact that Bangladesh opted for separation, proves the fact that just common religion perhaps is not sufficient for a nation state. In addition to that, I believe that economic reasons, political marginalization are very important factors for people not identifying with the national narrative. And that is the main topic of this book. It is identity. And I think people either have or develop different identities if they don't feel represented in the national mainstream. And I think that is the case in Balochistan. Of course, you have several other aspects like culture, language, food, clothes, history. That's always a matter of perception, very nicely highlighted in this book. But it's a matter of identity. You cannot force an identity on anyone. You have to be in your concept of nation open enough for minorities to identify as well with the national mainstream. And seemingly this has not worked very well in Pakistan.
Thanks. Huma, back in the 80s, when I was a college student, and we used to go around calling ourselves Marxists, and we wanted to break out of what we were being taught at school and colleges in the name of Pakistan studies, for example. So in 1985-86, a series of books came, which we found totally liberated us, and that was K.K. Aziz's Murder of History. Then there was one by Sibte Hassan called Battle of Ideas. Then to a certain extent, Aisha Jalal's The Soul Spokesperson, right? And then eventually that, I think, opened the floodgates. And that's why I think we have these brilliant books like what Ali has been writing in the last 10 years, right? So what's the difference, I want to know, of what, let's say, Murder of History is, how that is written? Because in Murder History, he just writes, this is what's written in Pakistan's textbook, this not, it's just fact correction over here. But eventually, in books like these, it's not only that this is a fact, it's actually trying to understand the stories behind these facts, these distortions, why they happen exactly. So how would you differentiate, let's say, both those series of books I've just mentioned, between those books and books like what Ali has written or has been writing?
So basically, Murder of History is the analysis of the textbooks, basically, and highlighted the factual errors and many other things in that, but it was a very popular one, and people start raising question, what is written in the textbook of Pakistani textbook about the Pakistan movement. But in recent years, and as you mentioned, Ali Usman Qasmi book, the thing is that they are now, how our academia is looking at the past and how they are analyzing. And there are numbers of young men, I may say that, who are now coming out of this narrative of nationalism, and they are now have an idea of what debate is going on or challenges or the terms in different terms and ideas. So if I give a reference of Ali Usman Qasmi, because I thoroughly enjoyed that book, and important thing is that he talks about how a citizenship, a process of citizenship, and also a nationalism idea is in Pakistan developed. And I think so might be on the concept of citizenship and how citizenship is evolved in Pakistan, might be this is the one important book. Although citizenship and issues related to it discussed in some of the books, but not specifically on the basis of debates which were going on at that time in 1950s or an early phase, when there was a phase of making of a constitution. So Ali Usman Qasmi use of different sources or references, vast literature he studied, and in which we may include the interviews, proceedings of the National Assembly, and even newspapers. Common people are writing or giving their opinions on different issues.
Like he's digging deeper,
much deeper. And this is covered in almost around 60 pages on citizenship. And then in Nation State, he also mentioned or highlighted how different symbols or symbol pictures and other things are used for developing a nation state. For example, selection of the photo of Qaid-e-Azam, which picture should be used. Then there are flag of Pakistan, the debate on discussion on the flag of Pakistan, color of the flag of Pakistan, and also change the names of the roads and other things. So I think it is a very rich book which discusses different aspects. And also there is a chapter on history writing also, how in 1950s there are different phases on history writing and how historians are using it. he mentioned categorically Dr. Ishtaq Hussain Qureshi, which is known as the ideologue, and also the contradiction in his approach in 1960s, in 1950s, and then when there was a period of Ayub Khan, so centralized government, and then there is another book came under the title of A Short History of Pakistan, instead of using of those terms. So I may say that if we would like to study what actually happened in this process of making a nation state, I certainly would like to students and also other people should read it, and they realize it is not just have one thing or state accepted it. There is so much going on behind the scene, and there are forces which dictate how to change the narrative of history writing. And as you compare it, I think now the new emerging historians of Pakistan is overcoming this phase, and they are now looking at the past in different angles. People's history, and they are writing now on different aspects of the history of Pakistan, and they are very rich literature, and they are exploring the different evidences, you may say that, or different sources of history. So we hope so, okay, in better position, a history, a discipline of a history in a better position.
Ali, before we go into question answer session, we'll be playing something. Abhi nahi, thodi der mein. But before, I want to just ask you, this is a question, like, you also teach at LUMS, right? And everybody knows your work, everybody knows your thoughts, everybody knows how you approach history, especially in South Asian history, you know. And then I'm also very good friends with Dr. Muhammad Wasim, who's also teaches at LUMS and wrote a brilliant book recently called Political Conflict in Pakistan. So you have these amazing teachers, you know, with these sort of ideas. And yet I was talking to Dr. Wasim, and he was so terribly disappointed in his students. I'm sorry, Dr. Wasim, but so are you guys always fighting with them? Are they always challenging you? Because you see, again, they have been indoctrinated. We all were, you know, but somehow we broke out, you know. But do you find it challenging if you, for example, start telling the stories you tell in this book? I think a lot of them, they will be extremely shocked. For example, we talk about majoritarianism and how indoctrination is done in this country. You talk about this board game which you used to play as a child. Please tell us about that. That's brilliant. That's a clever way of how indoctrination was done into little kids playing board games. Do tell us about that board game, please.
About your the first question, I mean, it's the challenges or frustrations are manifold. One major, I think, is the language barrier as well, that many students who come from, you know, relatively very fluent backgrounds, they cannot read Urdu texts. And also, you know, the even otherwise, I mean, reading is it's difficult for students to convince students to read more than like 5 pages, 10 pages. But other than that, I think it's a very exciting time in Pakistani academia as well. That for the first time, I think, in 50 years or so, that we there is like the beginnings of some kind of intellectual ferment in this country. You know, I love this quote by Aisha Jalal. She called Pakistan an intellectual wasteland. You know, after 1951-52, when the Communist Party was banned and the progressives were suppressed, and it's not. And it's not that Pakistan did not have its share of good historians or academics. You know, they had some fantastic people, Aligarh graduates. You know, you have worked on them. But you know, along the line, with the passage of time, with the burden of ideology, they could not, you know, compete. And so Pakistani academia, Pakistani historiography declined. But now in the past 10, 15 years, so that's the exciting part, where IBA, Habib, LUMS, now AKU, and other places. So there are these vibrant discussions taking place. So it's a mixed bag. About that board game, it's a there used to be a children's magazine called Axmann, and like other children's magazines, they used to come up with special issues every year, and along with that special issue, they would give a gift. So one of the gifts which they gave in 1990, I think, was called Manzil Pakistan. And it was a board game where, the idea was that you start from 712, obviously, and it ends at 1947. So what are the landmarks which facilitate the onward progress of Muslim nationalism and hence the creation of Pakistan, and what are the setbacks which hold you back? So the progress is, Muhammad bin Qasim invading Sindh, and the setback is Akbar inventing Deen-e-Ilahi. So at 1857, or it's a setback, and so that's the. So when we had this little launch party at our house, so we then invented our own board game as well, where we had some other kind of like, what helped and what didn't. I'll show you when you visit Lahore.
So basically saying that Muhammad bin Qasim was the first Pakistani, Deen-e-Ilahi was a big no-no, things like that. So from childhood. Okay, another thing which Ali takes great pleasure in this book and others, if I may, is also to hint and suggest that what we take sacred, for example, the secular sacred, for example, things like the national anthem, the flag, the creators behind it maybe weren't all that serious about it. Like, I will just play a little clip of the person who wrote the lyrics of the Pakistani national anthem, and you'll see and hear that he wasn't all that enthusiastic about it. So basically what we've been told that this is sacred, the flag, the anthem, nationalism, patriotism, have very interesting stories which really don't have such sacred roots as such. We have very normal, everyday people behind it. Good poets, maybe sometimes good ideologues, but not very serious people. So we'll play a little audio of Hafiz Jalandhari, who wrote the Pakistani national anthem, and he's talking about it.
Yeah, and he is, just a little context that, so the tune for the national anthem was approved first, and then the government invited poets to submit their poetry to write an anthem based on that tune. And Hafiz Jalandhari, as we know, was the person who wrote Pakistan's national anthem, was very unhappy with the tune. And in this first audio that we'll play, he's actually mocking the tune itself, which, as you point, we feel it's something very sacred, and people would stand up on their seats, to show respect. जो पहले वाला clip है ना, वो जरा चलाइए.
अब आप हैरान हो, कहेंगे जी आप कैसे कहते हैं? मैंने कहा जी मैं आपको सुना देता हूँ. ये जो धुन आपने दी है, ये धुन ये है
जी.
पान 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 पान. अब मैं इसको आपको सुनाता हूँ, आप हंसेंगे. हाय 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 हाय.
So, so this is what he thought of the tune, but still I would say, no one else could have written such a brilliant piece of poetry based on such a tune. But the other thing is that he had actually written another anthem prior to that. And that anthem, I find, it was much more lyrical, was much more relatable than the very heavily Persian anthem that he wrote, which is very alienating, which, doesn't talk about any part of Pakistan, does not really, doesn't really connect in that sense. So it will show you like how with the original anthem that he had written on a different tune altogether. Ab dusre wala chala de.
जिंदगी क्योंकि है, जिंदगी बख्शो, जिंदगी के लिए जिससे हरकत पैदा हो, तो मैंने ये तराना लिखा और वो तकरीबन मंजूर हो गया. इसको सुन लीजिए। अब मेरा गला तो ठीक नहीं, ना मैं साज रखता हूँ, साज में बजा नहीं सकता, लेकिन धुन आपकी समझ में आ जाएगी। यूं है, ऐ मेरे आबाद वतन आजाद पाकिस्तान, जिंदाबाद पाकिस्तान। तेरे मंदिर तेरे दरिया को सारो मैदान, सल्तनतों सामान खुदाए पाक का है एहसान। तू है पाक अमानत जिस पर जिंदगियां कुर्बान, जिस पर जिंदगियां कुर्बान। तुझ पे निछावर माल जान औलाद पाकिस्तान, जिंदाबाद पाकिस्तान। चांद सितारा तेरा परचम रहमत बार निशान, इस परचम का साया हम पर लाया अमन अमान। खल्क़ खुदा का फर्द फर्द है शाद पाकिस्तान, जिंदाबाद पाकिस्तान। अदल मुसावात और उख़ुव्वत क़ुव्वत है ईमान, अदल मुसावात और उख़ुव्वत क़ुव्वत है ईमान। मशरिक़ मग़रिब दीदा व दिल हैं दोनों हैं ज़ीशान, मशरिक़ मग़रिब दोनों दिल हैं दोनों हैं ज़ीशान। आम रवादारी पर कायम जमहूरी ईमान, आम रवादारी पर कायम जमहूरी ऐवान। कलमा तैयब उस्तवार बुनियाद पाकिस्तान, जिंदाबाद पाकिस्तान, जिंदाबाद पाकिस्तान। ये था वो।
Maybe they chose the Persian one
जनाब,
because they wanted nobody to understand.
तकरीबन तय हो गया कि हाँ हफीज साहब।
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, this was not approved, but the one which
The
was
other
more
one,
formal,
which nobody understands
Yeah, which no
really,
one
which
understands.
people even say is not even Persian. It's Persianized Urdu. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people are saying like.
it's like India's national anthem, which is Sanskritized Bengali, but it talks about the Indian landscape, right? But in case of but the point is that Urdu was not even the national language, was the majority of the spoken by the majority of the people. So to adopt a very heavily Persianized Urdu anthem was very alienating for the Bengalis. So if you read Bengali newspapers from that time period, they were very upset, and they in fact were demanding as if there should be another anthem in Bengali. There should be one anthem in Bengali and one anthem in Urdu. So that is why if in newspapers back then, people were passing on sorts of judgments, making fun of the anthem, especially because it was so incomprehensible.
Yeah. Okay, we'll open up the floor for questions. Please.
Brilliant discourse. Well, historical negationism is not unique to our part of the world. It's common everywhere. If you look at Great Britain, Europe, America, but the difference, what I see, I am not exactly a historian. I call myself the accidental historian. I'll tell you later why. But what I see is the negationism in Great Britain, it relates to incidents. In our case, we start hitting and denying the roots. So there's like a whole universe of difference, in terms of historical versus roots versus going to incidents, negating, denying, fabricating. So coming to the point, straight to the question, what is that cement that keeps India together as a nation in spite of the fault lines, in spite of the fractures, in spite of discords, multiple ethnicities, changing landscape of demographics? We are more or less similar. What is that cement to all of you?
Democracy.
Is that all?
I think so. I mean, a democratic tradition, ideas of republicanism, which are much deep-rooted and in which the ruling party, especially Congress under Nehru, invested a lot in cultivating that kind of, which is not to glorify and to overlook the excesses of the Indian state, but investing a lot in cultivating that sense of the Indian Republic and being democratic. and recognition of communities, and especially nations, as a form of unity in diversity. Whereas in case of Pakistan, I think there has been an attempt at overriding these kind of national identities to enforce or forge one singular nationhood, you know. So I think that's a very, very major difference between Pakistan and India, that Pakistan does not want to recognize that Pashtuns are a nation, Punjabis are a nation, you know, and that so on and so forth. So I think that's the major difference.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the session. I'm a writer with TFT Naya Daur. My question is addressed to Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin, I'm also ethnically Baloch, and honestly, as a subject matter expert on Baloch nationalism, I just wanted to ask you, what in your view is the role played by India, specifically RAW, in bolstering the nationalism and also promoting violent extremism amongst the youth there?
Personally, I think that India plays no role in the origins, development, and formation of Baloch nationalism. It has been an accusation for almost 100 years now, but to me it seems to be more like a knee-jerk reaction. I've never seen anything close to proof or evidence. It's a permanently repeated accusation, but according to my knowledge and my research, which was concentrated on the 60s and 70s, I never found any evidence of that.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah. Jinko bhi de dein, jo unka.
My question is to Sir Ali Usman Qasmi Sahab. Is religion matter in nationalism in Pakistan? And second question is, what is Pakistan, Mulk or Sultanat?
Pehla question kya tha, sorry?
Is religion still matter in nationalism in Pakistan?
Okay.
And second question is, what is Pakistan, Mulk or Sultanat, according to your
I mean, as
title?
for the second question, I mean, as some people read it the way you are reading the title, but my intention was slightly different, which was to show the semantic ambiguities of these terms as to how the open-endedness of them and how we sort of, for the lack of conceptual alternative in vernacular languages, we're adopting or borrowing Western political terms which do not really cohere. So that was my intention. About religion, yes, I mean it's I think this has been an ongoing debate that it's a very religious society, and they are shaped, and as Paracha Sahab keeps on saying that these are there is no denying the importance of religion, but it's about like what kind of religion. There's no just one kind of religious belief or practice in Pakistan. It varies so much, but yeah, I mean religion has been important, and this importance of religion was recognized by major political thinkers in India, starting from Tilak, Gandhi, Jawahar, Khilafat movement leaders, Iqbal. Each one of them recognized the importance of religion and how do we deal with it, how do we sort of like engage with this religious tradition, was that is more important rather than a suppression of or denial of its importance.
One more question. किधर बैठे? Please here. इधर आ जाए. आपको फिर मैं 2 questions ले लूँगी. पहले इनको दे दें. काफ़ी देर से वेट कर रही हैं. Here. आप हाथ उठा लें. जी आप. जी.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for this panel discussion. It is so interesting. I'm a teacher, and my question is to Ali Usman. As a teacher, how do you overcome this roadblock or this thinking that the students that I also face have towards this institutionalized way of thinking about religion and citizenship or national belonging populist narrative. How do you kind of, in a very, in a way where you are not imposing your ideas, but then opening it up to discussion, how do you tackle it?
No, that's a very good question, because on purpose, I teach a section of on Pakistan studies, which is a compulsory subject. And as Nadeem was pointing out, that this is the importance of trivia or stories. So they might sound like trivial information, but for students, they have certain kind of a shock value. When you tell students that Chaudhry Rahmat Ali, the man who coined the term Pakistan, was deadly opposed to the Pakistan that was created, and he called Qaid-e-Azam as Quisling-e-Azam, which is to refer to a Nazi puppet of Norway. So they're taken aback, and and that generates certain kind of interest. And this is how they, at times, they get interested in reading more about alternative history. So that's one of the strategies perhaps we can try.
I think we've run out of time. They'll just kick us out. We can talk after the session. Sure, we can talk after the session. But the book is now available. It's more affordable version available now. Right at the stall. Please buy this book. Please. It'll make you a more informed and better person, especially if you want to sort of air your opinions. Thank you so much.